Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I bring in Chris McCabe. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Good to be back, Danny.
Good. Well, I haven't seen you for a while. Since January, I think last time we had you on, wasn't it?
Yep, you've grown a beard since then, and it's very
Why?
attractive. Yeah,
Well, it's been growing for a while, but yeah,
keep it trimmed.
I'll keep it trimmed.
Yeah.
Right. So let's start with our favourite one. Talk to me where we are about with reviews. You've been saying that you've been dealing with.
I guess my amazement is I'm still dealing with as many suspended accounts for product review abuse per week that I did, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago. And I'm not sure why sellers haven't figured out that Amazon's just getting tougher and tougher on that and more aggressive in terms of enforcement.
And so, give us an example. Is it all this like all the true tested stuff that we already know that they're being suspended for those things? Is that because of naivety, or it's basically they're not getting away with it so much?
So one big cause is because people still don't realize that it isn't just about not asking for a 5-star review or not asking for a positive review.
Yeah.
Because when they're suspended, the first thing they come to me and say is, here's my messages to buyers. I've never asked anybody for a 5-star review in any of these messages. But then I read the messages and none of them are compliant with policy.
Yeah.
And we can debate, the nuances of how the policy is written, but you and I and everyone talking about this constantly in this space knows that you can't dissuade somebody from leaving a negative review, whether or not you ask for a 5-star review. And then once you know it's going to be a good review, send them a link and give them encouragement to be positive review.
So basically you're filtering responses is
right. You cannot filter responses. You can't reduce the likelihood of a bad review. I understand people are nibbling around the edges and, trying to play around in the gray area. But for this, there's no gray area anymore, not to Amazon. And we can debate whether it's heavy-handed enforcement, whether they should be doing it this way or not. But don't be the low-hanging fruit. It's much harder for them to track all the people using all the Facebook groups or fake buyer accounts, tracking down PayPal payments. That's 10 times harder for them to do. Maybe they'll track them down eventually, maybe they won't. But in the meantime, who can they easily get? They can get the low-hanging fruit, which is your messages aren't compliant. And we've made it very obvious. They think they've made it obvious to everybody that you can't send messages like that. And what baffles me is that sellers are still doing it. I assume because they're losing sales rank and they're losing, they're not tracking the same revenue growth that they were a year ago. And I understand that. Yeah. But that's no reason to kind of, drop your...
One thing I'd like to point out here, this is something that Ivan Demarov, he posted this in his group a couple of months back now. And so basically this is a screen grab that I got up on the screen here. This is people that are permissions granted to when they're using the Android app. So allows the app to read data about your contacts stored on your phone, including the frequency with which you've called, emailed, or communicated any other ways with specific individuals. This permission allows apps to save your contact data, and malicious apps may share contact data without your knowledge. So it's giving you the full access to the network, view network connections as well. I'll add this to the show notes. So slightly different thing here. This goes back to the whole friends and family thing. And if you read between the lines of what this is saying here, when, you need that 6th degree of separation is what they're saying here. So this is where it comes into play, your friend, your family, because of the frequency of touch points that you have with these people, which is why it leads back. Because obviously not everyone knows why, people get caught for friends and family. I'm not condoning it. I'm just pointing out here is that this was picked up by Ivan and these Orange Hat group. It's very interesting to see, the accessibility that Amazon's got. I don't know whether this is on like iPhone and stuff, because this is just a screen grab for Android. But it's still obviously going to play a big role in what you're saying now in terms of accessibility towards information.
Friends and family, they're not necessarily telling you who your friends and who your relatives are. They might be if there's an buyer account with name overlaps and address overlaps. But the idea is that to them, it was long ago prohibited to ask friendlies for reviews because they tend to give you nice reviews.
So talk to me about product review teams that you have contact with Amazon. You're a former Amazonian. What's going up? What's the mindset at the moment? What are they focused on?
At the moment, they're keeping PRA people behind tall walls, and they're keeping them. You don't have public. You're not. I mean, you're supposedly able to report abuse to those teams, but all they give you back is that message of, "We'll review this. We can't tell you what the outcome is." I think many of us in the community have made different runs at, who are these guys? How do they operate? Um, what's their decision tree? What's their SOP? What tools? I don't really need to know what tools they use. I need to know what they're doing with good information when it's reported to them. Just keep in mind that, one thing I've learned is that they're certainly hip to competitors reporting each other, but if they deem the information to be good, they're okay with competitors reporting each other. It's a valid report of abuse. Do they do anything about it? A lot of times they don't do anything about it. And that's something I'm still working on trying to figure out.
Yeah. And in terms of when, you've got fake good reviews, so a competitor laces your listing and then reports you, have you had to unpick any of those kind of messes before?
We try to figure out where they came from, any patterns between the reviews of the reviewers themselves. Obviously, if it's a bunch of reviews that tend to say the same thing, which a lot of those are, especially from those, bot armies, we try to point that out. But we, at the bare minimum, we get the account annotated. And I usually do some research and start looking into it in terms of, is this going to negatively affect the seller down the road? But a lot of the cases I've seen are more like sellers who are eager to get positive reviews, take the bait from some third-party service, and they're complicit in getting those 5 stars. They've agreed to use some sort of service. Generally speaking, I don't think sellers ever put much thought into, if I start using this third-party service, is it going to get me suspended? I'm not sure why that's still the case. There should be a check down list or a tick the boxes list that every seller uses in terms of, before I hire this company, are they going to get me into serious trouble?
So, Amazon's onto a lot of the black hat companies. They are aware of these, and I'm assuming they're dealing with these internally. It may not look like it from the outside, but I'm assuming they've got their eyes on these.
They know who they are.
They know
and
who
if
they
it
are.
looks like you use one of the companies that they're already circling, if the same techniques are there, the same wording is there, the same pattern of behavior, if there's IP hits. I heard recently there was some black hat ring where they had they didn't use the right VPN. They had a mistake in the sign-ins, and a bunch of IPs were exposed.
Yeah.
And a lot of those seller accounts were linked to each other and that black hat service. Guess what that means? That means based on one IP sign-in, one slip-up of the service you're using, you're all of a sudden linked not only to a service that Amazon's investigating, but a bunch of sellers that they've already closed. Do you think that's a good idea? That's gambling with the fate of your entire business. Do you want to do that? Make that conscious choice before you ever start.
Talk to me about ASIN locks, where the ASIN has been locked down so you can no longer provide or get any more reviews. Have you come across any of those where you've had to unpick those kind of cases?
There's 2 kinds from what I can tell. Sometimes they eventually lift the block. They're just investigating a suspicious pattern of overnight reviews or within a certain time period reviews, whether it's 3 or 4 days. And then they lift it because they just had to temporarily halt additional reviews until they could go through them.
Yeah.
I think PRA teams are spending a lot of time with those kinds of manual investigations. The second kind is they decide that the reviewer has too many reviews for the same kinds of products in too many suspicious places, and the reviewer is considered tainted, and they block that reviewer from leaving any reviews. So sometimes it's the ASIN itself that's blocked until they can temporarily investigate and figure out if it's legit. And then other times it's reviewer based, where they have to decide if that reviewer has to go.
Talk to me about, do you have much conversations in terms of rebates? Has that come across your desk in terms of people being suspended for those? Not that I've heard cases, but obviously it's that middle ground. There's a grey area.
Okay, rebate services. There have been people who have told me that they've been using third-party services that do rebates. And they've added that to the plan of action in their appeal because Amazon, of course, wants you to name names when it comes to these services. which means that Amazon's investigating and spending much more time around these rebate services. And is that being used to induce a positive review or positive review behavior? So, I mean, the overview is Amazon's spending a lot more time on this. They're investigating things more. They're taking it much more seriously. And above all, they're tired of all the public criticism of whether or not reviews are legit. So you just have to expect for the rest of this year, they're going to spend lots of time on it, be very aggressive with it, and that any risks you take around this might get you suspended.
Cool. That makes sense. Is there anything else you want to cover before we go?
No, just understand that there's lots of abuse going on. Hijacked listing, I mean, that still happens. That's one reason why they're looking at cutting Vendor Central down to size. There's a lot of listing abuse. I mean, this is kind of commonly known now through Vendor Central, a lot of Vendor Central abuse where async contributions are monkeyed with and your listing doesn't look like your listing anymore. Your brand is attacked. So
well, yeah, with the VC, you've got like the name changes, people changing the weight and the size changes. You've got
putting you in a different category.
Different category, yeah. I mean, what was it, Michael Hartman, where it happened to him? He was taken out of a category and put in a restricted category where it's very difficult to reach.
Adult category.
Yeah, to be reached Amazon inside. And before you know it, you've lost a shitload of sales and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's numerous different attacks like that.
But I think that's going to get, hopefully, I mean, I think what happens, people find new holes, don't they? I think you have these shifts. So from my understanding, you know, it might be if Amazon wanted to slow this whole thing down with Vendor Central, I'm sure a few lines of code may resolve it. I'm not saying that's definitely sure, but I'm not a programmer. But
tools access is what they need to change, and they have changed some of it, but obviously,
it's just reducing the contributions, allowing the user end, reducing those contributions, putting a block in place. You know, I think that could be done, but then if they really wanted to do it, they would have done it. Because I imagine this is putting a burden on the support team and stuff like that.
Oh, I do have one more thing I want to mention, and it feeds off of this conversation. So what I was going to say about this was it takes a long time to build new tools and test them and make sure they work. Account health, the account health dashboard, you've probably heard lots of complaints about how it never updates and how the display of intellectual property complaints, you get them resolved, it still shows up there, safety complaints, inauthentic complaints. I had a conversation at the Prosper Show recently with somebody who works at least part of the time on this, and they said, look, it takes a long time to build a new tool at Amazon. We know that that's not 100% accurate. We know that waiting 180 days for that page to update doesn't make sense to a lot of people. We know it's confusing, but you can't build new tools, test them, and teach them to investigators overnight, and then roll them out to show everybody who sells on the site. So you have to kind of understand that there are these huge needs for new tools, but there are so many priorities competing for engineer attention and manager attention on any given week at Amazon that you just have to kind of read through the lines sometimes. It's not always going to be displayed in a very obvious, easy to understand way.
Sounds good. Yeah. Cool. Let's leave that there. So how can people reach you?
Right. So I have a contact form on ecommercechris.com, of course, and then you can also email me at chris@ecommercechris.com and let me know if you have any questions about product reviews or if you want to show me any language around the reviews before you go live with it, because I can certainly take a look for you and give you a sense of what's compliant and what isn't.
Sounds good. Guys, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, we've got Seller Sessions live in London, June 1st. Grab tickets at sellersessions.com/live. I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.